Hello, I'm Nick Sanderson. I work for the Broads Authority as Education Officer, and today we're going to do one of my favourite walks, and that's the stretch of the Angles Way between Carlton Colville and Beccles. So I'm starting here at Carlton Marshes, and it's a nice 8-mile meandering path along the southern bank of the River Waveney. One of the best things about this walk is the wide open views across the grazing marshes. It's not hard to imagine that 2,000 years ago this was a great estuary back in Roman times. But today the river wall's been raised and the marshes have been drained. Now that originally was done for sheep and cattle grazing, but after the Second World War a lot of the marshes were turned into arable production for growing crops. And that was the case here at Carlton Marshes until about 4 years ago, when the Suffolk Wildlife Trust had the opportunity to buy 350 acres of arable marsh and allow wildlife to return. The water levels were raised, the scrapes were dug, and the wildfowl and the wading birds came back. And it's that interaction between human land use and wildlife that's going to be a recurring theme throughout this walk. So we've walked about 2.5 miles along our route from our starting point at Carlton Marshes, and we've arrived at another Suffolk Wildlife Trust site, which is the big grazing marsh area of Castle Marshes. Castle Marshes is crisscrossed by a fabulous network of dykes, and it's these dykes, these freshwater dykes, which are really special habitat for all sorts of rare and wonderful species. The dykes were mostly dug by hand way back, but now the sort of place that you could find water vole, shining ramshorn snail, Norfolk hawk and dragonfly, water soldiers, which are a plant with spiky leaves that sink in the winter and come back to the surface in the summer. But the thing about Castle Marshes is also been a site chosen for the reintroduction of one of the largest British spiders, which is the great fen raft spider. Now, fen raft spiders lurk around the edges of grazing dykes, and they will feed on anything that falls into the water, sometimes small, sometimes quite large. The animals are incredibly predatory, and they lay their eggs and make their nursery webs in the tops of things like the water soldier plants, which are very spiky. Other things to spot on Castle Marshes would be things like barn owls throughout the year, really, marsh harriers, hobby in the summer months. They chase dragonflies and swallows, and all sorts of other birds that drop in as they're flying on passage. Might be a good spot to see whimbrel, that are a passage migrant, to visit the site in the spring. There's always a chance of seeing a larger animal here. There's a large population of Chinese water deer here. They're a small dog-sized deer that, as the name suggests, they're not native to Britain. They're introduced into Britain back in the early part of the 20th century, and they've now really established themselves in the British countryside, especially in East Anglia. We've reckoned that we've got about 10% of the world population of Chinese water deer in Britain. There's always a chance of seeing otter on the river wall, or walking in the river as you're walking on this walk, but you're much more likely to see the signs that they've been around. And in fact, just a few minutes ago, as we were walking past, I noticed a trail of an otter just down the side of the running into the river. So come over here. trail running down into the river, and the otters marked it with its droppings, or spraint as they're known. Now you can look at an otter dropping and you'll generally see the little fish bones or maybe fish scales within it, and they use this to mark the territory. So tracks and trails are really good things to spot as we're walking along. The evidence that animals have been here, even if you don't see the real things, you know they've been around. Let's go a bit further. So I've walked a few hundred metres west of Castle Marshes Reserve, but I'm here at North Cove Staithe. The word staithe refers to a mooring place for boats on a river and derives from an Old Norse word for a landing stage. In fact, before the building of the railways and the good quality roads, the river was the vital transport link between Beccles and the ports of Lowestoft and Great Yarmouth, and it would have been the route for the trading wherries bringing cargoes to and from the area. Nowadays these waterways are mostly used for recreation, and it's easy to forget that the role they played in the economic development of the towns along the valley. 150 years ago this was really a working landscape, with people clearing dikes out by hand and maintaining the drainage mills, and there would have been wildfowling and fishing for food. So despite appearing quite natural, this environment has been heavily managed by people for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And it's the history and the heritage, as well as the wildlife of the Broads, that makes it such a special place. So, I'm now about 8 miles from the starting point and arrived in Beccles, a town that's been branded as the southern gateway to the Broads. Now, there's been a recorded settlement here since the 10th century, but river engineering works in 2006 revealed the remains of a much older structure. Now, today, the town marsh is owned by Beccles Town Council. It was given to the people of Beccles by Queen Elizabeth I in 1584 in recognition for the town's importance as a centre for the woollen youth. Now at that time, the river was probably wider and less constrained by the embankments, and Beccles was one of the most important ports of the east of England. So, finishing the walk here, I'm going to catch a bus back to Carlton. Alternatively, I could take the train back to Alton Broad South. I hope you've enjoyed this virtual garden walk, and I hope I've shown you something about how humans and wildlife have worked together along this beautiful stretch of the Southern Broads. Thank you very much.